Hello, folks, and welcome to another installment of Risk Unfiltered. I'm happy and privileged to have the CEO of the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute. She took time off from a busy schedule to sit with us to chat about all things corporate governance. As we normally do. Oh, by the way, I must thank folks for allowing us into your workspace and to making Risk Unfiltered one of the leading podcasts in risk management. That I think we ranked number 17 in the risk management podcast space. So I have to thank the listeners and the folks like the CEO here. So Miss Rampersad de Silva, welcome to Risk Unfiltered, ma'am.
Thank you, Ken. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
You're most welcome. So, Kamla, why don't you
Thank you for the invitation.
You're most welcome. So, Kamla, why don't you tell folks who you are, from whence you came, and
Thank
what
you.
the Institute is about?
Yeah, so I'm Kamla Rampersad de Silva, as Ken shared. I'm the CEO for the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute. The Institute was established in 2012, so we've been around for quite a while. It's a non-profit organization, and this is important for us to keep in mind. And whilst we are non-profit, we are also membership-based, which means that people choose to join us as members. We have over 300 individuals who are members from across the Caribbean. And these are from a range of territories, over 8 of them: Jamaica, Guyana, Barbados, St. Lucia, Belize. I'm forgetting some of the names
It
now.
happens. It
But
happens.
yeah, we have Cayman Islands, so quite a few of the countries represented as members. So, and our purpose as an institute is really to help improve corporate governance practices among organizations. So that's whether it's private organization, those that are publicly listed, state enterprises, or even nonprofits. Organizations need to be governed and led, and as a result, we are happy to work with everyone and help improve that space in terms of how effective the board is with their governance.
Okay, so I have an issue because, as you know, this is the Caribbean Risk Management Academy, but we have also done work in Guyana and Belize, which is not necessarily part of the Caribbean, right? So, and so should you consider expanding the name Caribbean to include Central American, South American? Well, not a long name, but
No.
sound good enough? You good with that?
I'm happy to label Guyana as as Belize, even Suriname, because I was in Suriname last week, and there was a question: really, can they consider themselves Caribbean because they are in the South American
Latin
landmass?
American space, yeah.
That's right. But the truth is they're part of CARICOM. They see that
Right,
they have a lot of qualities and characteristics that we share in common. They
right.
prefer to be part of our community, and we're happy to embrace them.
Well, good. So that may help me in my decisions going forward as to how to relate to these Caribbean yet not necessarily geographically Caribbean entities. Okay, so what is the so governance is not necessarily a generic term, but it can be very broad based. So what is the mandate of the institute?
Well, when we talk about improving corporate governance practices, really and truly, because the environment changes constantly, there is no one playbook by which you can say to a board, this is how you should govern your organization. So our focus really is to constantly be discussing the changes in the environment, helping directors to remember their role and function on the board, because not all directors have been trained or understand
Right,
exactly what governance is versus
right,
management. So
right.
we engage in over 50 events for the year. We hold a range of panel discussions, workshops, conferences that brings people together from the region. And we are constantly pushing the envelope to help build critical thinking on the part of directors and their
Okay.
executives. executive team so that there's better decision making in the boardroom.
Okay. Do you tweak your training sessions dependent upon whether they're in the private versus government agency space?
Yeah, to some extent, but
Right,
not tremendously so, because all directors carry the same duties.
right, right.
And so we remind them of that, that their interest is to look after the interest of the organization for its long-term success. Now,
Okay.
in the state enterprises, that sometimes need a little more work to help them
Yeah,
understand that,
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
very often there are directors who think that it's the interest of the party that appoints them that they must serve.
Okay.
So it's quite a bit of work sometimes. So in that sense, sometimes the conversation can be a little bit more nuanced. But the
Yeah.
reality is all directors need to understand fiduciary duty. They need to understand the change in environment. They need to understand how they manage their relationship with their management team and
Right.
how they can govern effectively, because well-governed organizations should
Mhm.
mean that employees enjoy better quality working conditions, better quality of life, and by extension, the community is better off and we have a better society.
And I dare say better decision making as well. Yeah. So and this is uh how should I say? Um like a very heavy question. So in the corporate private space, especially in financial institutions, one must go through a fit and proper to become a board member for the most part, right? That does not obtain in the public space. Do you think, and this may be your personal take, that once that sort of fit and proper should be part of the consideration when selecting individuals for board on state enterprises, or some sort
I,
of
I like
qualifying?
I like what Jamaica has done.
Yes.
There is law in Jamaica. It's called the PBMA, the Public
Right.
Bodies Management and Accountability Act,
Yep.
where they require that directors should receive training in corporate governance.
Mhm.
And then persons who wish to serve on boards must apply to be, there's a check and balance they put in place to verify the person's credentials and all that. And then they form a database that allows government to pull
Mhm.
when they
From the
want yes, to appoint
yeah.
state directors. So I think that's a good system because yes, uh, you don't want to restrict the pool of persons who
Mhm.
may wish to serve as directors, but you want to encourage everyone that if you are to serve on a board, you should understand what is the role and function of the board.
Yeah, yeah, and your part in that collective responsibility, if you will. So staying with that theme, so let's pull that thread. Can the institute then, as it is in Jamaica, advocate for that type of change in the selection of um
Sure.
board members for
And
agencies? And
and
how
we
do you
have
plan
been
to do
doing
so?
it. We have been doing it for the last few years. From the time I found out about that legislation, which was 2021, we
Right.
have shared several times on it. So we are building awareness in the region, which is the first step, helping people to realize that this is something that is useful to demonstrate that Jamaica has already started on that road so we can learn from their lessons. So I'm
Mhm.
encouraging not just Trinidad and Tobago, but Barbados and Guyana and all of our
Mhm.
Caribbean countries that we should look at the legislation that Jamaica has passed and see how we can make it work for us as well.
And what has been the reception thus far?
Persons who attend our panel discussions and conferences, and a lot of them are very open to the idea. They would like to see this happen. But as you know, this kind of change is not an overnight process.
Right, right,
Once
right.
it's involving some measure of politics, it means that you have to constantly be raising awareness. You have to constantly be lobbying. And at
Mm.
some point in time, it would bear fruit.
Yeah. So here's my take. And if I may use Jamaica as another example, Jamaica is the only um island in the Caribbean that has legislation around enterprise risk management as well. The only
Okay.
one. I was in Jamaica 3 weeks ago, doing some training for the Ministry of Tourism. Um, and so I'm going to tie in that element of risk management with corporate governance. But to your point of yeah, it takes time to effect changes at a very high level. Um, but as a risk practitioner, I often tell executives that time is not on your side because
Yes.
risk is not static. So whereas, you know, the idea of having truly not always qualified but well-trained individuals on boards, maybe a couple years ago, that could have been, baby steps. But we are in an environment now where the what I like to call the velocity of risk is such that
Mm.
it's not waiting for folks to catch up,
Yes.
be
Yes.
trained, and so some decisions need to be made as hard as they may be, with some alacrity and recognizing that the environment is so uncertain. All right. And so my pushback, and this is, and I know it's not going to be an easy sell for you and your team because it's similar to what I have to do with risk management. First, you have to be an educator and then a seller, a salesperson in the spaces we operate in. But as long as the status quo remains by way of leaderships, and I'm speaking from lived experience now, and I've done extensive work with state agencies in Trinidad and Tobago and elsewhere in the Caribbean. But as long as the structure or the architecture of governance or risk remains as it was 5, 10 years ago, bad decisions will be made. That's just a fact, right? So it's kind of incumbent upon probably also you and I as leaders of institutes like what we have to push the envelope. So the question to you, my newfound friend, is how far can you push that that boulder up the mountain of changing minds and influencing people in the governance space? And
Well,
what tools
I
do
will
you
tell
have?
you, Ken, I absolutely love what I do.
Right.
I work day and night.
I can
I work
imagine.
24 hours, 7 days.
Yeah.
My directors sometimes express concern because they know I put in long hours and
Right.
they're like, you need to take care of your health as well because,
Of course.
that
And your looks, yes.
thank you. Yes. So the thing is, I have been teaching in the corporate governance space for a number of years. I taught in the MBA program, began with the Australian Institute of Business. So I've
Okay.
taught in Trinidad and Tobago and in Guyana. I've also taught at Lockjack GSB in their MBA program, corporate governance, sustainability, and all of that. So I understand the very strong theoretical background of the why this
Right.
needs to happen. What you are alluding to in terms of the constantly changing environment is the what. What do
Hmm.
we do? How do we do it? And one of
Yeah.
the things I truly appreciated, I have to tell you, I loved this point you made in a recent article that you wrote. I think this must have been this week's edition or this is it a monthly newsletter? I'm not
It
sure.
is monthly. Yeah, it's monthly.
Right.
Yeah.
So where you spoke about um, our senior executives and directors needing to have a measure of humility in
Yeah.
understanding and accepting that there are unknown risks
Yeah.
and beginning to place
Yeah.
that on the table as something that must be discussed and planned for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is even more urgent in today's world with
Yeah.
generative artificial
Yeah.
intelligence.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
We've just concluded a week of Governance Week that focused on governance in the age of generative AI. And I
Mm.
will tell you, I learned so much in that week. I learned about agentic AI that is
Yeah.
becoming your digital colleagues
Right.
working
Right.
side by side with you. And I mean, these are machines
Yeah.
that can learn at such a faster pace than any human can. So,
Yeah.
pretty soon we become reliant on these things. And then understanding what the implications of that is for our businesses. Yes, greater efficiency in our operations and so, but what about the human element of it?
Right.
The employees who may be displaced, that's one thing. But there was quite a bit of conversations during Governance Week as well about when an error is made, who is accountable? if we allow for the AI to
Yeah.
take over a lot of process, it is humans who are impacted when an error is
Yeah.
made.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
therefore ensuring that we place our minds to this so directors understand the need to ensure there's an appeal process that would allow for proper vigilance. Because Ken, I'm sure you are familiar with that case involving the post office in the UK.
Yep.
What a tragedy.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Hundreds
Yep.
and hundreds of
Yep.
workers who were unfairly imprisoned and charged and persecuted because it was a computer error.
Yeah.
So these are the things that we need. There must be some humility in understanding that we don't always have all the answers and to not just push it under the rug, but
And
break.
therein lies, Kamla, I respectfully submit, is going to be one of the biggest challenges for your institute by way of working with the leaders. You can have all the best frameworks and policies and guidelines and training, but if the individual and so one of the things I speak about when it comes to risk, hear me, and it's empirically proven. Your age, your gender, your ethnicity, your education forms how you think
Mhm,
and view risks.
mhm,
The majority of the leaders in Trinidad and Tobago, or in the Caribbean for the most part, are of a certain gender and age group. Fact.
mhm,
Most recently, and kudos to Trinidad and Tobago, you now have a female prime minister, female president, and a female opposition leader. Beautiful. And then my favorite PM thus far in Barbados, there, Miss Motley. But so when we and some of them, I dare say, and I've experienced this, lack that intellectual humility to see or believe that they aren't all knowing.
yes.
That not because I've been in this thing for 30 years. You now learning about AI like most of us. Yeah. Are you going to learn about it? I mean, you don't have to become an expert as a director, but you have to know the impact and effects. Yeah. So, and I'm concerned, Kamala, and I'm sure you may be as well, is with respect to if the right decision makers aren't put in position to make right decisions, bad decisions will be made.
Right. And what I want to add to that, Ken, is that even when you think you have the right decision, to know that you can be wrong.
Oh, phew,
Because
hamana, hamana, hamana.
the
Yeah,
environment is so complex. And not only that, we live in a world now where if you truly want to be effective, you have to become comfortable in having entirely uh different assumptions and you have to
yeah,
work
yeah.
with all these things that really um it's going to challenge all of what you think you know and what has worked for you in the past. And you have to be comfortable in that discomfort.
So one of and this conversation, I think we probably have to do a part two of this, but one of the modules in our program, and it's the only program that offers this module, Kamla, is a module called behavioral risk management. Yeah. And I have taken um, so much interest in the behavioral aspect of decision making. And when I look, with all due respect to the folks now who have been put on boards, um, it is a bit worrisome. Even more so when I look at the critical boards. And I'll speak to the Trinidad and Tobago part of it, and um, it has happened in Jamaica. It has happened in to a lesser extent because of that new law. But if we aren't careful, and this so I'm speaking from lived experience in the selection of board members in this environment, we aren't going to get very far. So we'll go come from full circle to know. That's why I asked you about the mandate of your institute. So you have a very heavy lift, right? Um, as would be the case for us in when it comes to things like operational risk management and enterprise risk management. You have to educate, then sell the value and importance, and that's a heavy lift. And so I could relate to your long days and long
I am
nights.
sharing that. I will tell you, and I'm happily sharing it with our
Yeah,
over 300 members. What
right.
we are doing is we are building a community of
Yeah.
people who are having this discussion very candidly, who
Okay.
are acknowledging the changes that are happening, and who are willing to really be the best that they can to improve their critical thinking, to build their network across the region. So if you need contact with someone that you can get information, you could bounce off ideas, have an entirely different perspective,
Hmm.
because we have to be aware of our personal bias.
Oh,
So many times we
yeah,
make
yeah,
decisions, critical decisions,
yeah,
and totally unconscious of as to how biased that decision is.
yeah,
So having someone who is totally outside of your current context that you
yeah.
bounce off an idea of,
So, so
that's what
I don't know if you saw this. I wrote an article, and I don't know if it's in the last newsletter, but it's on LinkedIn. And I have a blast email I send out every Monday morning, right? And I wrote about the 10th man rule, which is basically speaking to what dependent if you're getting advice from the same core group of individuals all the time,
yes.
it becomes very subjective, right? Um,
Well, it always is, huh?
well,
It
yeah, for
always
the
is.
most part, but let's say a
But
board is sitting.
I'm going along with you one time. I totally agree with that.
Oh
If
yeah,
we
so let me
taking
give you an
advice from the
example
same people.
in your space. So they just put together a board for one of the agencies in Barbados or in Trinidad and Tobago. And none of the members of the board have been trained or educated in what good governance is about. Let's just doing a hypothetical. None of them. So who guides whom? Who? The question that follows from what I just said to you is, are you finding that the boards are reaching out to you, or do you then have to go sell the value of what you're doing to the boards?
No, no, I could tell you, Ken, we have worked really hard over the last 5 years to build CCGI's reputation.
Right.
And so now we get a lot of people reaching out to us.
Okay.
I'm just really, really pleased about that. So yes, and but we are a very small institute.
Right.
We don't have a lot of resources because we are a nonprofit organization, and we have been trying to grow organically. We are not dependent on sponsorship. We don't seek grants from anyone. We have no global support from any international agency that's offering financial support, nor do we want it. It has to be that CCGI is a social entrepreneurship that
Mhm.
is able to raise its own revenue to cover expenses so that we are building a sustainable organization that's going to be able to be neutral, not influenced by anyone in carrying out our work. So
Okay. So
we
with that in
there,
mind,
people are reaching out to us.
okay. So by way of people, are you talking about individuals that aren't necessarily board members, or the entity reaching out to you to come educate our board members?
So both, both.
Okay.
Yeah, we have currently a request from Jamaica that we'd be looking at for training, not for their board, but for some of their management team. We have a request. In fact, we're going to Guyana in August to train some senior managers and a session with their board as well. So, and we do from time to time have in Trinidad and Tobago as well. So we do get requests, which I'm
Okay.
very happy for, and then we provide that. I haven't yet started that process of trying to directly approach boards to sell.
Okay.
What we are really trying to do is build that common community of people who, by
Mhm.
word of mouth, are saying,
Yeah.
we had
Yeah.
this discussion at CCGI. This is so useful. It's helping me. And let people come in because they see the value of what we're doing. and they in turn will strengthen the network because CCGI is not a for-profit organization. So we're not looking to sell things. We are
But
looking to build a strong foundation.
okay, but let's let me push back on that a little bit. So it's not the selling of the things, is selling of the value of the thing, right?
Right.
So it's and again, in my space, when I say sell, you, you educate. This is what enterprise risk management is about, operational risk management, or any one of the risk discipline that we operate in. Because, Kamla, if the leaders can't think it, they can't act on it.
Agreed.
And if they have never been trained, and hence the reason about I mentioned experience in and of itself could be a risk. But if you have never, you could have three PhDs, five bachelors, and none of them had modules as many of them were in the prior 10 years about governance or risk. Where's that information, that knowledge going to come from, right? So it's nonprofit or for profit. I will respectfully submit. Oftentimes, we find ourselves educating them and then having, and it's my word, sell the value of the proposition that says you guys need this bloody thing, right? Having a board in the absence of good governance is like having I know PLR without peas or doubles without the China or the what do they say in Ghana? Not curry goat, but goat curry or whatever the big disclaimers are. But I think you get where I'm going with this. So yeah, um, it has more.
But we do see, remember, at
Mm,
the end of the day, Ken, it's also about the person's value system.
yeah,
So there may be some who would not have had the formal training, but who recognize the value of these things. And so for themselves, they go
right.
out and seek the information and they build. For the greater part, the region has benefited from persons making good decisions and we are very stable organizations and our
Right.
economies are doing relatively well.
Mhm.
It can do better in some respects,
Right.
but for the most part, I think generally our directors do mean well. They do try to do well. We
Mhm.
have to constantly remind them that it's a continuous process.
Yeah.
You have to always be open to new learning,
Yeah.
but ultimately it is that value system that
That
you have
and
to understand your purpose.
you're very generous with your words with with respect to some of these board members because I've done too much to mention and I tell folks I've been doing this across four continents now. So but let's touch on something which is what I like. Before I get there, what I think you offer like two training programs or workshops right now. Um, so who does that training? It looks like you primarily do most of it.
No, no, I don't. I
Okay,
can, but I don't.
okay. Yeah, I want to give that up, and my folks know I my days for
Yes.
lecturing is limited. But so you have a cadre of consultants who will come in and
Professionals. Yes,
right.
yes, yes.
Okay,
So depending on the ask and what the specific areas that they may require training, I will find a facilitator to match. And that's how we do it. And one of the things I've been trying to do is build a regional group of persons. So we do have some international experts. I mentioned Dr. Chris Pierce earlier, but
right.
we are building in the region. There are a lot of people with incredible talent. And
Yeah,
so we invite them to come and do workshops as well.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm there just to decide, it's but I understand it, and therefore I ensure that the quality of what we offer, and that the level of discussions bring value. So every time someone comes to one of our sessions, whether it's a panel discussion or if it's a workshop, it must always be that it's a quality experience. They've had a great experience, and they are going to share that information with others, and that's how we would grow.
Okay. Um, yeah. So I Well, we at CRMA, we have a cadre of consultants across the not just the Caribbean, but internationally, as far as South Africa and Australia that work with us, either as lecturers and or as consultants, depending on the project we're working on. Because what I love, and for a matter of fact, I had a meeting with the chief risk officer of an entity in Trinidad and Tobago this morning. Um, we don't bring lecturers to do. We don't bring lecturers to lecture. We bring practitioners to lecture.
Right.
Yeah.
And that I find is where the real value is
Of
as well. That
course.
it must be,
Yeah.
and it's the
Yeah.
same thing with Governance Week. We
Yeah.
had over
Yeah.
50 speakers from around the Caribbean region. But you know
Mhm.
who they were? They were people who have actual practical experience
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
makes a
Yeah.
huge. So I want to share with you, for instance,
Mhm.
you used this word earlier, volatility. So I
Yeah.
want to speak to Friday morning. Our opening speaker was Patricia Roseal. Patricia did an amazing job taking apart the whole risk management framework and talking about
Yeah.
artificial intelligence in the context of that. But one of the major points she made, and it really stayed with me, she says, when you're doing your risk assessment, it is normal. People look at what is the likelihood, what is the impact.
Mhm.
But it's very rare that they look at volatility.
Yeah.
And that can sometimes make the difference. And she gave the example of the Deepwater Horizon disaster with BP. She
Yeah.
said when the information was eventually released, you could have seen that the risk management framework was in place. They did identify the likelihood of the risk. They
Yep.
did,
Yeah.
but they did not take into account the speed at which it was going to unfold if the risk
Well,
materialized.
so now you're getting me all warm and fuzzy because now you're into my space. So this morning I sent out, and I believe I've added you to my mailing list, something about the value of your risk registers.
Yes, yes, yes. I read that this morning.
Brilliant. Okay, um, the question I'm going to ask after I make this statement is where does the institute see or apply, especially given what you said about the speaker there the Friday morning, um, the intersection or the interconnectivity between governance and risk. So park that for a second. And the speaker is spot on because um, identifying or identifying a risk is one thing. Selecting controls to mitigate the risk is another thing. But risks moves the velocity moves so fast that your decision making and your controls have to move along that same continuum. You cannot take a risk that you identified 3 weeks ago and a control to mitigate that risk may not be applicable a week from now,
True.
right? Because oftentimes controls are static, risks aren't. Yeah. And then I'm going to introduce you to a medical term, which is what we call the homeostasis of risk management, where the controls you could put in place, and it happened in the case study with Deepwater Horizon, the control you put in place to mitigate that risk becomes even a greater risk onto the organization. The control itself. That's a story for another day. So it's called the homeostasis, and it's a medical term. So let's go forward to the question. How does and I think in looking at one of the programs you offer or the training, there is some points that speaks to risk management in the governance space. That's one thing. But from what you are doing with the institute, and kudos as well, because I follow what you guys have been doing. Um, and some of the same consultants I've crossed paths with professionally. So as someone who is living in the space, and we sort of like touched on that a little bit earlier, how critical for the institute? Well, let's start with you because risk, I tell folks they must personalize this. Risk management starts with you as an individual. How do you see the interconnectivity of risk and governance. And then how does the institute push that out?
Well, the truth is, Ken, there's nothing that you do that doesn't involve risk.
Hmm.
And the bigger your decision, the more you have to weigh the risks associated. And therefore, risk must be a fundamental part of what directors are doing when they sit in the boardroom.
And
So
I imagine that was part of the 5-day governance.
yeah, governance week. Yes,
Right.
it always is. No matter what we
Okay.
do, you have to understand risk and you have to ensure that you properly assess and you have control mechanisms. But all those things is just as you say, you can put all kinds of systems in place and then the world gets topsy-turvy and all falls down. So what then do you do? As
Yeah.
human beings, you could never be entirely right. And so I want to quote another one of our contributors for Governance Week, a
Right.
very young boy, bright young boy named Keegan Patrick from St. Lucia.
Hmm.
Keegan said, trust is the new currency. Listen, that was such a beautiful thing because it comes right back to who are you? What do you stand for?
Yeah.
How much can people take your word? Because if you make a decision and it's wrong, then the assessment of that and how people respond, a lot of that is going to depend on your reputation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so building that case for people to always be trying their best. We don't expect you to be perfect. Bad decisions can be made,
Right.
but those decisions should not have been intentionally bad.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Or even without the intention, without the use of the word intention, um, it must not. The reason for the bad decision must not be because I didn't know or I
Or
wasn't trained or whatever.
well, the thing is, you could
And bad things will always happen, right? Or bad thing with them. You can have the best
yeah.
governance protocols or risk management. Bad things will always happen. That's a given. And that's where the word resilience comes into the conversation. So we talk about a resilient organization. We talk about making risk-informed decisions, making risk-informed decisions, and having leaders. There we go with the individuals again. The leaders who know what good governance entails,
Mhm, mhm.
right? And again, kudos to you and the institute for pushing that envelope to ensure that the and board members are
But,
leaders
yeah,
are,
word is
are
getting
trained.
out. Yes, and people
Yeah,
are responding, and I think directors are becoming more and more aware that there is need for them to engage the conversation. There's need for them to understand exactly what corporate governance is, and there are lots of frameworks that can help them be able
yeah,
to
yeah.
understand the basics of it. But
Mm.
one of the fundamental things that we would want directors to inculcate is the ability to be able to engage in introspection, reflect on your decisions, reflect on your life, identify your bias, know when your assumptions is guiding some of your decision making, and be open to a wider range of perspectives in the room.
Yeah,
Be able to be persuaded by a stronger argument
yeah,
that
yeah.
hold your ground and be arrogant.
And I think, and I guess a follow-up question to you would be, um, do you also share with your participants that there are consequences to their actions or inactions, right? Or is it folks still thinking, this is Barbados and Trinidad, nothing happens to directors, unlike in the US and UK, where you could be held personally accountable up to CEOs and CFOs for bad decisions. Um, and
So yes, I do believe some directors see that as remote.
Yeah.
They don't see
How
it.
do you treat with that? Or is that part of the desk stomping that you have with these guys? Yeah, yeah, but
Mhm.
is that part of
Oh,
of
so Because we recognize that that is so, I did in fact plan to have a session that I was going to entitled Directors Behind Bars.
Yeah, and there that exists.
Demonstrate.
Those are some good case studies. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
You
Just
have
to
yeah
sometimes bring it alive
yeah.
and remind people
I
that
do
this
that
is what it is.
all the time in my training sessions. And then too, I draw parallels between what happens in the Caribbean versus what happens um, in Europe and particularly in the UK and in North America. And so I bring, I mean, most or all of my adult life thus far was spent working on Wall Street or in the UK. So my reference point, and I say this to folks all the time, will be very different than yours. So here's a question I ask. You could be a CEO, a CFO, or a senator in a government, and we have had those take our training programs. I ask the folks the following question. Do you think you can do what you're doing and work for an entity in the UK or the US?
Well,
And that gives them pause. Some of them say yes, some of them say no, because couple factors come into the equation. There is something we are huge um, practitioners of and teachers of, which is risk culture, right? And culture is all about attitudes and behaviors. Then there's the old work ethic issue. So oftentimes I'll say to folks, not given your qualifications and your experience, can you work for an entity in the same industry operating in the US or the UK? The majority will say yes. The majority will say yes. So then I ask the question of you, Madam CEO, can the board members of the entities you have been involved with could sit on similar boards, say in the US or in the UK?
to be honest,
Or will be
don't go down.
qualified, or will be
Yes,
qualified to
no.
do so?
I honestly I don't go down that road. What I do instead
Mhm.
is I appeal to their patriotism, to
Mhm.
national pride and to regional pride.
Okay,
We in the Caribbean can do so much.
we
We
can.
have to
We
care
can.
enough. That basically is how I craft a lot of my conversations because I love my country. I
Right.
love being in the region. There have always been opportunities to migrate, but I've never taken it because I'm a Trinity to the bone. So I never,
You're
I never
Caribbean to the bone.
yes, you know. So therefore, we always try to remind people of the consequences to their decisions.
Okay.
Please
Okay.
understand that there are real people who are impacted if your decisions are not well made, because we don't expect you to be perfect. It's not
Yeah, yeah,
possible. You
yeah.
make decisions on the basis of the information that you have in front of you. And we have often lamented of how little data we have gathered over the years that
Oh,
we take proper decision making. And the world has changed so
yeah.
much now that even that historical data is not really going to be so useful in guiding
No,
you.
it's not.
Therefore, what's
Yeah.
important? Try your best to engage all the minds in the room. Be open to having proper, candid discussions that's really
Have some intellectual
anchored in
humility.
yes, and anchored in a value system
Yeah,
that's driven by the purpose of your organization.
right. So do you also get the participants who come to your training? And the participants are usually, board members who or want to be board members or executives, right?
Yeah,
So most of them are already in place.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, how do you solicit, how does the Institute solicit not necessarily feedback, but progress? So in the risk space, we have risk maturity models that says, okay, this is where you are at this point in time in 6 months. Where do you want to be? And we'll help you identify how will you get there and what needs to be done, right? So does the Governance Institute does it have a measurement tool that says, okay, you are at this point in your governance experiences and build, but this is where you need to be.
Mhm. Well, we don't really believe in using the generic tools that would have been designed for the US and Europe
Right.
and
No, build your own because we built our own. We
right. No,
built our
so
own.
let me share with you something that we have not launched yet, but it's been germinating
Oh,
and
great. So you're announcing it here. Brilliant.
so we have developed something called the 3Cs project,
Okay.
looking at the board's decisions that takes climate into account, the level of crime in the environment and what white collar crime and so that may be
Right.
happening, and the culture of the organization. So
Right.
that's the 3Cs: crime, climate,
Brilliant.
culture.
Brilliant.
The angle that we wish to look at this is if you want to evaluate how well your governance is, most often
Yeah.
the response has been to do a board evaluation.
No, that,
Is the
yeah.
board evaluation really going to tell you that? No,
No.
it doesn't.
Yeah.
Because the true measure of your governance is the quality of your organization.
Yeah.
How
The
well
outcomes, the
does one
outcomes.
understand
Outcomes. Yes.
exactly? And therefore,
Outcomes. Yeah. Yeah.
one of the things we have done in the past, of course, is in collaboration with Lockjack, we had done a governance ranking looking basically at annual reports. But we want to go deeper than that.
Okay.
So at this point, we are designing this program that would allow us to go into an organization and ask the employees
Mm-hmm.
what they know and understand and how they feel about the practices in the organization as it applies to paying attention to impact on climate and the environment. What about the quality of ethics in the organization?
Mm.
Uh, how how is white collar crime treated, identified, dealt with? Because in the region, one of the saddest thing is how high we are in the corruption to
Corruption index. Yeah.
right? So we need to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And to really be able to treat with this, the measurement we'd like to do is employees' feedback on the quality of governance in the organization. Not because they know the directors, but because this is what they feel in their everyday life.
Right.
So they look at the operations, they can tell the use of plastic, the use of waste,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah.
So our intention would be to go into the organization, collect this data, develop a baseline, and then go back a year later and
Yeah.
collect the data again and share it with the board. So
Yeah.
the board should have that temperature of what's happening within the organization unfiltered.
Right. So
It's
you are designing. So I love the point that you made about using generic off the shelf stuff. So we don't do that. For a matter of fact, we have our own proprietary software we use to do our risk assessments and risk management with. And we developed our own risk maturity model. So in your space, you are developing a governance maturity level. But the beautiful thing about that is as you would find out as you roll this out, is that it allows you to also tweak what you offer by way of training and development
yes,
for
because that's it. Once you pick up the gaps, so long as the board is
exactly.
interested, we
Yeah.
can now find the professionals to help them
Yeah.
understand and
Yeah.
close those gaps. So every year
Yeah.
we expect that there should be an improvement.
Yeah.
It will
Yeah.
never be perfect because we live in a world that is
Yeah.
constantly changing. So, but it should be that directors have a very clear idea. And it should be that employees themselves understand that their voice counts, that how they view their feedback will be taken into account, and the
Yeah.
board will be aware that
Yeah.
this is what is happening within the
So,
organization.
so let me push
And
back
it's
on,
something we plan to do across the Caribbean.
right, push back on two words you used and equated to Jamaica. So it's not should be, must be, must be. Should be is still kind of
Yes.
aspirational. So if you have legislation, right? If you have legislation that guides it is a must
Yes.
be, right?
Mhm.
And so I tend to in term for some folks, when you use words like, depending on the individual, should be, it sort of like tells them in law you have an option, right?
Yes.
In the case of good governance, you should not have an option. You
Yes.
must not have an option. It is what is good governance is good governance. It's just there isn't, not so good governance. We could go on for like another hour or so, Kamla. We have to do a part two of this, and this is so germane to the environment and to the institutions and to the islands.
Mhm.
I want to thank you as a practitioner or as a cousin of the governance. Um,
Thank you. And Ken, I want to thank you for the work you are doing in your space as well.
oh yes, yes, yes. I want
So
to appreciate.
important.
Yeah,
Yes, because as I tell you, every single thing involves risk.
yeah,
And
yeah,
your real ability is when you are able to understand, assess those risks, know how to mitigate,
yeah,
know
yeah,
what control measures to put in place, because that is what helps you to get the outcomes you want.
yeah, yeah.
The work that you do really is fundamental in helping build people's understanding so that they do it in a more informed manner.
Yeah.
So,
We need to have a conversation about how can the two institutes collaborate to drive home the value of risk and governance. But that's a conversation for another day. CEO, Mrs.
so, well, we love
Kamla.
collaborations. We have been
Yeah,
doing collaborations with a range of governance institutes. Even
right.
we have had over the last few years a couple conferences on women and governance, and we have collaborated with the governance institutes led by women. So the
Brilliant.
from South Africa, the Gulf, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Mauritius.
Yeah,
It's been great when collaborating brings such wider perspectives
I
and
love
views
it. I
and
love it. So in our space, speaking to that, in the program, the enterprise risk program we have at Cable, I started off doing many of the modules. 5, 6 years. I am so don't want to lecture again, but I love the fact, and it works for you as well at the Governance Institute, when you have different perspectives and different lived experience. So now we have about 11 different folks from across the globe that brings that lived experience and that knowledge and that culture. So someone from South Africa is joining us for the next cohort, right? Um, and that is critical in shaping future leaders, right? Because when you talk about things, and I seldom use the word critical thinking, I usually say system thinking, but the future leaders in the Caribbean, the folks who are in college and university, they need to be introduced at a very early stage. So something you can mirror for the governor side, we have a risk for youths program. So one of my and this is now occurring to me. So and this is taped, so it will serve as a reminder. I think the next one I'm doing in Trinidad, I'll probably invite you to tag along so we can marry because governance and leadership is so intertwined, right? And add in the risk element. So we'll tag team and go talk to the youths about good risk management, good governance. I think that's a virtuous thing for us to do to give back.
I no, but there are people doing that in the space here in Trinidad. I will tell you,
Okay.
and their members even, Umat, Harrington and
Mhm.
Hancock Consultant, they've been doing that in terms of governance and sustainability. And so we
Right,
try
for
to
the
do
youths,
it
for the young
really,
ones, for the
yes,
teenagers
in
and stuff.
secondary
Okay.
school. Yep, yep. And he's
Okay,
been doing it
brilliant,
really
brilliant. I
well.
didn't know that. Brilliant. Okay.
Yes, yes. So we welcome everyone in the space who is
Okay.
doing whatever work they can because this needs all hands on deck.
It does. It does. Yeah.
So
Especially when it as it relates to future leaders and in future proofing Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the Caribbean as
that's
well.
right. But as
So
I tell you, we have over 50 events for the year. So our calendar is usually quite full. I'm just on a short break now because Governance Week has just ended.
yeah, I
But
got it
yes,
got very good reviews. I had some folks who attended, some
yes.
colleagues.
Thank
So
you.
Miss De Silva, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. This was such
Thank you for inviting me.
yeah, instructive and informative and educational um, uh, discussion. And I love it when I can walk away learning something, right? And that's all on you. And kudos to you and the Governance Institute for the work you're doing. Keep pushing the needle. Yeah, keep climbing those mountains.
Thank you, Ken. And I want to tell you, I learned quite a bit from you just in reading your articles as well. I love this morning's one that you
Right.
mentioned earlier, but also what I'd taken away was this aspect of really having the humility to know that
Yeah.
there are unknowns, to
Yeah.
acknowledge that there are unknowns,
Yeah.
place it on the table, and be ready at any point to know that that is now something that's going to materialize and let's figure out what it is and move forward. That's what makes life exciting to her. It,
Yeah. And,
I'm
and I
very
and I could tell by your not necessarily personality, because that comes into play too, but by exuberance, when talking about thing, and that's a winner when that passion comes out like that. So congratulations,
Thank you. I love what I do.
and it shows. It shows.